Hi guys, Aaron here and welcome to the workshop. Lately there have been a couple of questions regarding group sets and electronic group sets more specifically. So today I'm going to talk about those in more detail, what are the advantages and disadvantages, and why I in particular have changed all my bikes to electronic group sets. So let's start first at perhaps the most common bike type that people ride and the one that I ride the most on, and it's the humble road bike. So why would you want or need an electronic group set here? The first advantage, as I see, because people think generally that electronic group sets shift faster and better. I don't think this is true because a mechanical drivetrain can shift even quicker when it's properly set up with good cables, etc. The problem is that this situation or state is more or less temporary because you need to constant attention for the mechanical gears to work perfectly. That's particularly true if you ride in bad weather conditions, in the winter for example. And the second thing is design freedom. More and more aero road bikes or aero time trial bikes even use more and more integration, more complex shapes. So this makes cable routing for mechanical drivetrains quite difficult. This is a prime example. This is an S-Works Wenge. It supports no mechanical group sets. So it allows for more design freedom. In terms of practicality, as I already touched on this subject, the electronic group sets work like you set them up for the first time, and then they work like that forever. All you need to do is charge the batteries, which for some people might seem, for someone who never used an electronic group set, might seem like a weird thing and something you can forget, but from my own experience after riding many thousands of kilometers on electronic group sets, I don't even find that an issue. On my road bike, I charge the battery every time I go for a race, and that's it. I never forget, and between the races it never really goes flat. SRAM have separate batteries in their levers. I previously had an ETAP levers set on my Madone. I've used it for almost 30,000 kilometers. I didn't have to change the coin cell batteries in there. They were still indicating lights, green lights. The other thing is building up the bike itself. It's just much quicker, particularly with ETAP. People also talk about reliability. Now, this is a double-edged sword here, because a mechanical drivetrain, if it goes bad, you can pretty much fix it anywhere in the world. On your shoulder you can change the cable, whatever. If an electronic drivetrain goes bad, it goes really bad because it's, well, if you break a component or break it, there's nothing really you can do to service it. On the go in particular, without the use of diagnostics, etc. It's more complicated with Di2 because you have all those wires there that can go wrong. In my experience, that was the only type of failure that I've experienced with electronic group sets, when a Di2 cable was, well, faulty and stopped transmitting, so the whole system stopped working. With ETAP, you don't have that possibility because the signals are transported by air and it's always there. So yeah, not really much to go wrong, no cables. The connection is bulletproof because it has been tested for years and years. So in this regard, the electronic drivetrains can be considered as more or less reliable depending on how you look at it. For me though, the most obvious advantage is in two things. So first is front shifting. Now that usually is better, even if you compare it to the best setup mechanical drivetrains. But for me, there is a function of trimming. So in case of Di2, the trimming is automatic. You don't need to think about it. Your chain will never rub. In case of ETAP, there's no trimming whatsoever because it's a yaw mag. And secondly, the flexibility here, particularly with ETAP, is that, well, if you look at my bikes, I don't really use front mags at all. In fact, in 99% of my riding, I don't have a front mag on the bike, no matter which bike I use. But because I have this setup, I can add it on anytime I want. I change the chainrings, I put on the front mag, done. You can't really do that with an electronic group set, or sorry, without an electronic group set. So for me, that's the main advantage. Of course, one by for me is the way to go most of the time. So yeah, the front shifting and the flexibility, which I will carry on to the next subject, which are time trial bikes. Now, positions and positioning on a time trial bike is crucial. In order to achieve your perfect position, you may need a lot of tinkering of different setups, extensions, stems, whatever. Now, the problem with mechanical is that you don't really have any kind of flexibility, because in order for a shifting to work, your cables need to be set at an exact length. If you change anything in your cockpit, it's no longer going to work. You have to reroute it, recut, resize, whatever. Very, very annoying and unpractical, speaking from my own experience. Or you have the cables too long and then you suffer from bad shifting. It's also an option. With electronic, no problem. Also, what you can't get, and it's not possible to get from mechanical, is shifting on a base bar and on the aero bar at the same time, which is also a big advantage. So for time trial bikes, electronics are a no-brainer. Then we move on to the dirtier subject, which is mountain biking. Now, admittedly, with the modern systems in mountain biking, you almost always get, or I could say straight up always, get a one by setup, like we've seen here on my dirty mountain bike after the race. And it works brilliantly in most cases. For me, the one use case which has caused a problem with mechanical, in general conditions, trail riding, even shorter races, it's never going to be a problem, I think, in terms of mechanical. I've talked about this earlier, but the reason I've upgraded to Axis is the fact that I do long marathon races. And usually in these long marathon races, you have, in good weather conditions in the summer, you have dusty trails, fire roads, etc. Then in some spots in the forest there can be mud, there can be crossing some creeks, there can be puddles you need to ride through, and over those 4 or 5 hours of racing, your bike gets really nasty and dirty. And all this dirt is accumulated also on the drivetrain, on the rear mag, on the cables, etc. And no matter how well I had my rear mag set up, after those longer rides, it just stopped working perfectly. Since this is a fully sealed system, there is no friction involved whatsoever. Everything is inside the motor, the mechanics, the gears. It just works every time. You charge the battery and you go. No matter what conditions, it's in my experience much more resistant to contamination. But this is true for all disciplines. Particularly useful for cyclocross. Last season I had one cyclocross bike with mechanical, one with electric gears. The one with electric gears, perhaps unsurprisingly, worked much better in muddy conditions because it's just not prone to the contamination that I got in mechanical. And I think the same advantage can be drawn out for a gravel bike used for long distance gravel races events. So as you can see, electronic drivetrains have merit in all disciplines. I think it's really necessary is the time trial bike. In the other ones, they're not really necessary at all, but they have some nice benefits to them. Well, they are just easier to live with, particularly if you do have a couple of bikes. You don't need to keep an eye on the cables that much, you just need to put things on the charger, set and forget, and you're done. They have more flexibility, more practicality, and yeah, I think this is also why you won't really see World Tour team nowadays on mechanical, because if you are a World Tour mechanic and you have to take care of 90 bikes or even more, then you don't really want to deal with cables, you just want to plug the charger in after a long day. So this is my take on electronic drivetrains from my experience. I'm sure you will have some comments to this, so leave those in the comment section down below. And if you want to see more about the stuff that I use for my riding and racing, don't forget to tune into the channel. It's all for today, and see you next time.